evening. I'm Doug Doran, Senior Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I want to welcome you to our 8th annual Nobel Symposium. We started doing this in 2007 as a way of celebrating research, scholarship, creative activity, and contributions to the greater good by focusing on the Nobel Prize, which is perhaps the most public example of an award to recognize activity in these areas. We really use this as an excuse to bring together the UD community and the broader Newark community to talk about groundbreaking work in areas ranging from basic and applied science to literature and political activism. As always, when the Nobel Prizes are announced, it's very easy to identify people in the UD faculty who have a very direct connection to the work that's being recognized. We are able to quickly gather researchers who work in the areas of science or humanities that are being honored in these prizes. And I'm really gratified by the fact that they're always willing to take the time to put together a talk to talk about the work where the prizes are awarded. We're especially happy this year to be in ICE-Lab for the second time. This year the prizes are remarkably interdisciplinary, and so that's even better reason to be here in this setting. This year the chemistry talk will be given by somebody with a PhD in biology. The biology talk will be given by someone with a PhD in psychology. The physics talk will be given by someone with a degree in material science and engineering. And the peace talk will be given by somebody also with a degree in material science and engineering. I'm not sure what that all means, but it does say something about the ways that boundaries between traditional disciplines have really dissolved, and that the work that people do is not doesn't really respect the traditions of academic disciplines. Before we get started, I just want to thank all the people who've contributed to this, certainly the faculty who've agreed to give talks tonight. I'm really grateful to them for taking the time to do this. I'm grateful to Mary Cleveland and Sherry Jones for all of their work in setting this up. It's really an enormous amount of effort, and they've just taken it on and done a terrific job with it. Dean George Watson from the College of Arts and Sciences is paying for this, and I'm grateful to him for that and his support. Katie Meyer and Ann Manzer have done a terrific job in getting the word out about this and helping us publicize this. I think this is the biggest crowd that we've ever had for this. Speaking of the size of the crowd, I'll mention that there's a few more empty chairs up in front here. We can bring a few more out. And there's some seating up there on the balcony where you can get a terrific view if you want to go upstairs. John Junk is director of the learning laboratories here. I want to thank him and Kimberly Doucette for helping us get things organized in here, and all the support staff in ICE-Lab as well. Chris Martin and his staff are responsible for getting the AV set up, and that was a little bit of a challenge, and things look great, so we're very happy with that. And of course, I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm really happy to see such a large turnout tonight. So we're going to begin tonight with a talk about the Nobel Prize in Literature. And we have two faculty members who are going to give this talk. Bruno Tebow, here to my right, is a professor of French. He's taught at the University of Delaware since 1987. He's actually earned 2 doctorates in French literature and civilization, one from the University of Paris and the other from the University of Maryland. He's a specialist in contemporary French literature and is the author of 3 books, including one on J.M.G. Leclésio, the 2008 Nobel laureate in literature. That year, right, when the Nobel Prize came out in literature, in fact, the Nobel Prize in literature, that's always the real challenge, to figure out who on campus will know about an author that I have never heard of, right? Which is typically the case in these, because they're very ecumenical and look all over the world to find great literature that most of us in the US don't know so much about. And when I learned that we had someone who was a world-renowned critic on Leclésio, I thought everything was set, and it turned out that Bruno was on sabbatical in France at the time and was busy giving talks about Leclésio over there and didn't have time to come back here. However, we got him again 6 years later to speak about the latest prize in modern French literature. He will be assisted by Deborah Steinberger, who's Associate Professor of French and Comparative Literature. where she's taught at UD since 1994. She's also the Director of Graduate Studies for the Department of Foreign Languages and Literature. Deborah earned her doctorate at New York University, and her research areas include 17th century French theater and journalism, and writing by early modern women. And with that, I'll introduce Bruno.
Thank you, Doug. Patrick Modiano. Patrick Modiano writes about the experience of Jews in occupied France during World War II. He also writes about the difficult choices faced by ordinary Frenchmen, French citizens, during those 4 years, including their role in deporting Jews to Nazi camps. Born in a Paris suburb soon after the war, World War II, in 1945, Modiano, now 69, has written some 30 novels, but relatively few have been translated into English. While famous and popular in France, he is little known in the US. This may change now, of course, with the Nobel Prize. And the jury awarded Modiano that prize, I'm quoting, for the art of memory with which this writer has evoked the most ungraspable human destinies and uncovered the life world of the occupation. Modiano has an interesting family background, but his childhood memories are quite sad and sour. His father, Albert Modiano, came from an Italian/Greek/Sephardic Jewish family. Modiano's father came to France and eventually became quite wealthy thanks to profitable black market business deals with the Gestapo and the mob. Albert Modiano also eventually abandoned his family. Modiano once said of his mother, a Belgian Flemish actress called Louisa Colpen, that her heart was as cold as an ice cube. The fact is, Modiano was brought up by his maternal grandparents, who taught him Flemish, a Dutch dialect, as his first language. He was baptized at age 5, but his parents didn't bother to attend the ceremony. Modiano was then sent to a Catholic school and later to an elite school for privileged kids in Jouy-en-Josas near Paris. After that came long, unhappy, hungry years in a rustic boarding school in the regions of Savoie. Echoes from those experiences can be found in 2 of his novels. One is Villa Triste, Sad Villa, published in 1975, and the other one in De Si Bons Garçons, Such Good Boys, 1982. Modiano typically writes very short novels, about 100 or 120 pages, and often in the detective genre. His stories are truly very easy to read. Modiano's early novels correspond to a new trend in French continental literature in the 70s, a return to the narration and to the plot after some 20 years of avant-garde textual experimentation. According to the Nobel Academy, and I think this is very true, I'm quoting, one of the central themes in Modiano's works are the problems of reaching back through memory, of understanding, of getting to grips with it, end of quote. Modiano's narratives belong to Holocaust literature, of course, but they are also part of what is known as autofiction as a genre. Autofiction is a term which was coined by Serge Dubrovsky in the 1970s. So those novels clearly delve into the puzzle of identity using 2 different tracks. reconstruction, and imagination. Needless to say, it is impossible for me to discuss all of Modiano's novels in such a short amount of time. So I will focus on his earlier works. Those works are the ones which made him famous. His first novel, La Place de l'Étoile, was published in 1968, and it hasn't been translated into English so far. It tells the story of a Jewish collaborator, like Modiano's father, who engages in shady activities during the Nazi occupation of France. This protagonist has a love-hate relationship with things French, as well as things Jewish, it seems, and through successive hallucinations, he plays the role of the Jew as a martyr, as a king, as a clown, as an avenger, mixing Einstein with Jesus, Judas with the Marx Brothers, and so on. This book can be best described as a dark and grotesque farce with political overtones, reminiscent of Louis Ferdinand Céline's style, but also somewhat similar in theme to Romain Gary's The Dance of Genghis Khan, published 1 year earlier. Modiano was awarded 2 very prestigious literary prizes for this first novel, for this first rather disturbing and abrasive novel. Le Prix Roger Nimier is one, and the other, Le Prix Fénéon. Night Rounds, 1969, and Ring Roads, 1972, form a trilogy with La Place de l'Étoile. Both books dwell on the dark years of wartime France, with the main characters working as double agents for the French resistance or for the pro-Nazi French milice. Both books were very well received by the critics and the public alike. Ring Roads was awarded the Grand Prix, the Grand Prize, for the novel by the Académie Française. Now let's turn to movies now. In 1974, Patrick Modiano co-authored the screenplay for Louis Malle's acclaimed film La Combe Lucien. This scenario resembles in many ways his previous novels. It tells the story of a young Frenchman who joins a pro-Nazi French collaborators organization after being rejected by the anti-Nazi resistance fighters. But then he falls in love with a Jewish girl, and of course it gets complicated because he has to hide her somewhere. The narrator of Livret de Famille, published in 1977, and this book has not been translated into English as yet. So the narrator of that book is Modiano himself. In this book, the writer explains he's fascinated by his family history, but quite dissatisfied by the administrative records of their lives. Thus, in 15 chapters, he composes 15 possible versions of his own life and family history. 15 stories that blend autobiographical data with imaginary memories in a Pirandello-like fashion. Modiano's best-known novel is Rue des Boutiques Obscures, and Out of the Dark is the English title. Modiano won the prestigious Goncourt Literary Prize for this work, which tells the story of a French detective struck with amnesia who searches for his lost past and identity. Alluding to Proust's famous theories or views on memory, Modiano gradually traces the protagonist's amnesia back to a few traumatic events during World War II. This novel displays a truly masterful choreography of shadows and shady characters. At the same time, as in most of Modiano's novel, much remains unknown, unsolved, or concealed. Dora Bruder, published in 1997, is not a novel. This text traces the sketchy but real life of a young Jewish girl deported from France and killed in a camp. Joanna Kilmartin's translation of this beautiful work into English comes with two different titles, and you have them there, Dora Bruder, of course, and the other one is The Search Warrant. Same translation, two titles. Dr. Steinberger will now read a few pages from that book. Deborah?
Good evening. Thank you. We find next to Dora Bruder's name in the school register under the heading Date and Reason for Departure, 14th of December, 1941. Pupil has run away. It was a Sunday. I imagine that she would have taken advantage of the free day to visit her parents. That evening, she failed to return to the school. Those dying weeks of the year were the blackest, most claustrophobic period that Paris had experienced since the beginning of the occupation. Between the 8th and the 14th of December, in reprisal for 2 assassination attempts, the Germans ordered a curfew from 6 o'clock in the evening. Next came the roundup of 700 French Jews on the 12th of December, and the fine of 1 billion francs levied on the Jewish community as a whole. And then, on the morning of the same day, the shooting of 70 hostages at the Mont Valérien fortress. On the 10th of December, by order of the prefect of police, French and foreign Jews living in the department of the Seine had to submit to periodic checks, producing special identity cards stamped Jew or Jewess. Henceforth, they were forbidden to travel outside the department, and any change of address had to be registered at a police station. In the 18th arrondissement, a curfew imposed by the Germans had been in force since the 1st of December. Nobody could enter the area after 6 o'clock at night. Local metro stations were closed, including Saint-Plon, the one nearest to where Ernest and Cécile Bruder lived. A hand grenade had been thrown in the Rue Championnet, very close to their hotel. The curfew lasted 3 days. No sooner had it been lifted than the Germans opposed another one throughout the entire 10th arrondissement, where on the Boulevard Magenta, persons unknown had fired at an officer of the occupying authorities. Then came the general curfew of the 8th to the 14th of December, the Sunday of Dora's escape. Around the Saint-Cœur-de-Marie boarding school, as the lights were extinguished in district after district, the city became a dark prison. While Dora was behind the high walls of 6062 Rue du Picpus, her parents were confined to their hotel room. Her father having failed to declare her a Jewess in October 1940, she had not been allotted a Jewish dossier number. But the decree issued by the Prefecture of Police on the 10th of December pertaining to the control of Jews had stipulated that, quote, subsequent changes in family situation must be reported, end quote. I doubt if Dora's father would have had either the time or the inclination to get her inscribed on a file before her escape. He must have thought that the Prefecture of Police would never suspect her existence while she remained at Saint-Cœur-de-Marie. What makes us decide to run away? I remember my own flight on the 18th of January, 1960, at a period that had none of the blackness of December 1941. Along my escape route, past the hangars of Villacoublay airfield, the only point I had in common with Dora was the season, winter. A calm, ordinary winter, not to be compared with the winter of 18 years earlier. But it seems that the sudden urge to escape can be prompted by one of those cold gray days that makes you more than ever aware of your solitude and intensifies your feeling that a trap is about to close. Sunday, the 14th of December, was the first day that the curfew had been lifted for almost a week. People were now free to go out after 6 o'clock in the evening. But because of German time, clocks had been brought forward by 1 hour so that everyone was on the same time as the Reich. Because of German time, darkness fell in the afternoon. At what moment of the day did the Sisters of Divine Mercy first notice that Dora was missing? It's certain to have been evening. Perhaps after the benediction in the chapel, as the boarders went up to the dormitory. I expect the Mother Superior tried to reach Dora's parents at once to find out if she had stayed with them. Did she know that Dora and her parents were Jewish? According to her biographical note, many children from the families of persecuted Jews found refuge in Saint-Cœur-de-Marie, thanks to the courageous and charitable actions of Sister Marie Jean-Baptiste. Supported in this by the discreet and no less courageous attitude of her nuns, she shrank from nothing, whatever the risk. But Dora's was a special case. In May 1940, when she entered the Saint-Cœur-de-Marie, the persecutions had not yet begun. She had missed the census in October 1940. And it was not until July 1942, after the Great Roundup, that religious institutions began to hide Jewish children. She had been at Saint-Cœur-de-Marie for a year and a half. In all likelihood, she was its sole Jewish pupil. Was this common knowledge among the nuns, among her fellow boarders? The Café Marchal on the ground floor of the hotel at 41 Boulevard Ornano, where her parents lived, had a telephone, Montmartre 4474, but I don't know if it had a line to the hotel or if that too was owned by Marchal. The Saint-Cœur-de-Marie boarding school is not listed in the telephone directory for the period. I found a separate address for the Sisters of the Christian Schools of Divine Mercy, but in 1942 this must have been an annex to the boarding school, 64 Rue Saint-Maur. Did Dora go there? It too had no telephone number. Who knows? The Mother Superior may have waited until Monday morning before telephoning the Café Marchal, or, as is more likely, sending a nun to 41 Boulevard Ornano, unless Cécile and Ernest Bruder went to the boarding school themselves. It would help to know if the weather was fine on the 14th of December, the day of Dora's escape. Perhaps it was one of those mild, sunny winter days when you have a feeling of holiday and an eternity, the illusory feeling that the course of time is suspended and that you need only slip through this breach to escape the trap that is closing around you. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Any questions?
We have a microphone back there if you need. And to ask, is he a very popular writer in France?
Definitely, definitely. Actually, I've got something I'd like to quote. He's a very prolific writer. He's written over 30 books. But, you know, when he got the news that he got the Nobel Prize, he made a little statement, and this is what Modiano said. I've always felt like I've been writing the same book for the past 45 years. And it's true that, you know, his books pretty much dwell on that era. And so you've got two kinds of readers in France. Some readers truly appreciate Modiano because, again, it's theme and variation. He always comes back to that era, to that theme of the war, identity, lost memories, and so forth. And what they enjoy year after year is to get a new novel that basically covers the same story, but with a few nuances and a few modulations, if you wish. Other readers, of course, may feel like it's too much, always the same thing. And a few readers would say that Modiano dwells too much on the past, is not facing contemporary issues. But yes, he's very popular, and let me share this with you. He has received numerous prizes, which I've already mentioned, but on top of that, for specific works. But on top of that, he's so popular in France, he's been awarded no more than 4 other literary prizes for his entire opus. And those prizes are le Prix littéraire du Prince de Monaco in 1984, le Grand Prix de littérature Paul Morand 2000, le Prix mondial Sina del Duco 2010, and le Prix Marguerite Duras in 2011. So maybe this is overkill. But he's extremely popular. And to really fully answer your question, I'd say that Modiano, when he was young, felt a bit like an outcast, but he has now become, no doubt, one of the most mainstream contemporary French novelists. But beware, Modiano stories can be quite deceptive. They may come as realist and humanist, but in fact they set a trap for the reader. And he will draw you into his disturbing sense of chronology, truth, and identity. So it's worth a reading, definitely. A great writer.
There's a question back there.
You mentioned that his father abandoned the family. Is there any speculation that this abandonment had to do with his being captured by the Nazis?
No. We know for a fact he basically, as I recall, Modiano had a younger brother, who died pretty early on, maybe when that boy turned 10 or something. But anyway, Modiano, his mother had a career as an actress, and his father was very busy doing, the kind of black market activity he'd do. So after a while, the parents pretty much left the boys behind, and the Flemish family had to raise them. And then later on, Modiano, of course, had regular contacts with his mother, but his father was, had turned that page and left the scene. Yeah.
Another question here. Yeah, go ahead, right in front.
Do I need the microphone?
Well, I'll repeat your question if you can.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This may be a named scientist question, but what makes him unique and remarkable in a sense that because the subject, there are other books and other movies written around this subject. What makes him Nobel Prize winner?
Right. I think I've answered that question when I said, well, of course, he belongs to Holocaust literature, and he's not, there are quite a few first-rate writers who focus on the Holocaust. But he has this French take on it through the situation in France. And the other thing is, like I said, he will draw you into this quest for identity that sort of leads nowhere, and that is postmodern. So he's got this classical style, easy to read, but he will draw you into, questions about identity, past, memory, and that is very much contemporary. Have I answered your question? Yeah.
All right, we'll take one last question, then we need to move on. Rakesh?
So is there someone who's writing in English which would be sort of comparable to him, or not something?
I can't come up with, quite frankly, I can't come up with an author that I could really, that I could really say is similar to Modiano in that sense. Yeah.
I would make a comment that there was another Nobel Prize laureate who got the Nobel Prize in 1960, Ivo Andrej.
Yeah.
He also got a trilogy for the Bosnian trilogy.
Right.
So there is a similarity.
In that sense, yeah.
But why do we not have the translation of the first of this trilogy?
Because it's very disturbing. I think some readers in France and elsewhere were disturbed. And at first, at the time when nobody knew that Modiano himself was a Jew, a few people were unsettled by the violence of some of his, scenes and portraits. So, yeah.
Okay,
So
let's thank Bruno and Deborah one more time.